though they were still there. And then within a day, the very same set of students had figured out how to take a video of themselves paying attention in class and then put that as their background and then walk away. So it really looked like they were there paying attention. So she had to implement the Socratic method of randomly calling on people to actually make sure they were actually in class. So this is the new life of educators, of healthcare professionals, and obviously all of us. So I appreciate the sentiment, Mike. So tell you what, we are at 5:04. There's exactly 100 folks that are here joining us, and so I'd really like to just get started. I want to first welcome you. Thank you all for being here. My name is Rusty Hicks. I'm chair of the California Democratic Party, and as I said earlier, I have the honor and privilege tonight of supposedly moderating, but really just having a discussion with three great candidates, three of which many of you already know, so they really need no introduction. But Audrey Denney, running in our congressional District 1. So I want to, introduce her, but I also want to show everyone a really interesting feature. At the bottom, you will have your bar that says mute, video, invite, manage participants, all that, record, all this. Then at the far right, it says, right before you get to leave meeting, it says reactions. And if you click on reactions, you actually see a set of hands that look like this, which shows up on my screen, or you see a thumbs up, which will also show on your screen. So we don't have the opportunity to really applaud everyone, which they certainly deserve. But I'd encourage you, if you want to give a thumbs up or you want to clap, maybe use the reaction feature. So I think we can give Audrey Denney a big round of applause, which is what I'm doing now. Welcome. We also have Pamela Schwartz, who is our candidate in Senate District 1. We're excited to have her here with us this evening. And of course, last but certainly not least, our candidate in Assembly District 1, Elizabeth Betancourt, right? So welcome to all of our candidates, and we'll give them the opportunity to speak and introduce themselves here in just a moment. Tonight is really an opportunity to talk about some incredibly important issues affecting the Northeastern California, North State. So everything from healthcare, which is obviously such a critical and important issue at this exact moment, to our local economy, to agriculture, to broadband access. There's a host of issues. We're probably not going to get to all of them tonight, but I think we've got the opportunity to touch on a number of them. Just a couple of housekeeping items. So this really is initially will be an observed conversation. I'm going to ask some questions, and our great candidates are going to step forward and answer those. So everyone will be muted in the first portion of our conversation, in the first portion of our agenda. If you have a question, feel free to type that into the chat box. We'll get that and certainly try to get to those questions. Our agenda is, I'm going to turn it over to our candidates and give them just a few moments to introduce themselves, although I suspect everyone here probably knows all of our candidates. But I want to make sure that they have the opportunity to introduce themselves this evening, and then we'll get right to the questions. This is going to be a fairly free-flowing discussion. I'd certainly ask our candidates not to, there's two others besides yourself. So leave a little something for them to add to the conversation. There's plenty of information to go around. So let's try to get through as many of these as possible. I don't have a stopwatch or anything. I'm keeping track of time or anything like that. I know what that's like as a candidate. You all know what that's like as a candidate, and it sucks to ask a really complicated question and then only give you 60 seconds to answer it, it is a little tough. Just leave a little something for somebody else to answer. So,
I'm
and
just
we'll
going
go
to
and
agree with everything that Elizabeth and Pamela say, so I'll
well,
go last.
This shall be a very quick and fast conversation, which is great. We'll get to everyone's questions. And so we'll do so in rotating order. So you'll each have the opportunity to be first. You'll each have the opportunity to be last. So with that, since Audrey stuck her hand up first, why don't we get started with our introductions, and I'll turn it over to Audrey for a couple opening comments. Audrey?
Thanks, Rusty. Super, super great of you to be here with us. I just scrolled through the faces on the Zoom and I recognized all of you. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time introducing myself because we are among friends. I will welcome you to my home and I will introduce you to one of my two kittens, Nash, because if you were not on early enough, you might not have seen this little rascal. He and his sister are my quarantine buddies. I am fortunate enough to have a full-time job still where I get to work from home. So I've got two little buddies helping me out all the time while we are also navigating how to run a campaign and how to help our neighbors in the midst of all of this. So thrilled to get to be here to talk about the things that we care about, and just thrilled to be in the company of Elizabeth and Pamela.
All right, very good. Thanks so much. Let's turn to Pamela. Pamela Schwartz from Senate District 1.
Yeah, hi everybody. It's really good to see everybody. I recognize a lot of faces too. So I appreciate everybody taking the time to spend some time with us tonight. I'm super honored to be here with Elizabeth and Audrey. And what Audrey said about, she agrees with what we say, and I have to say, I say the same thing. So I also am too, I'm very fortunate that I've had, my job has been continuing. Actually, I have two jobs and they're both continuing. So I feel fortunate about that. And again, trying to figure out how we're going to navigate through all this thing, this COVID, and meet people in person eventually. I'm very hopeful. So I just want to say thanks again, and looking forward to talking tonight about things that really affect us in the North State. Thanks.
All right, very good. Thanks, thanks, Pamela. Let's go to Elizabeth, Assembly District 1, a great candidate, Elizabeth Betancourt.
Hey everyone, it is really, really nice to see some faces. I am here in quarantine with my husband and our animals on the farm, and I have to say, if we're going to quarantine, springtime is a great time to be at home on the farm. I also feel super lucky to be able to work from home. I know not everyone is able to do that. And we've actually seen an uptick in people interested in getting produce from out here on the farm. So we haven't been totally by ourselves, but certainly trying to social distance. But yeah, it is great to see folks. And I have to say, I don't actually recognize everyone. So I'm really happy to see some new faces and hopefully get some new questions. So thanks everyone.
All right, thanks, Elizabeth. I don't know about new questions. That feels like a lot of pressure, but I'll certainly do my best. So why don't we just start with the order? We'll start with Pamela. We'll go to Elizabeth, and then we'll go to Audrey. So we're going to do that rotation, and we'll I'll try to remember who answered the last question first and get it right. If not, you can certainly correct me. So obviously the big challenge that we are all dealing with is COVID-19. It has really upended our lives in so many ways that we probably haven't fully appreciated as of yet. But the challenge for elected leaders on the state, federal, and local levels is, when's the right time to take the next step? What's the right balance between the health and safety of our constituents and the vitality of our local economy? So I'll turn this to Pamela to start. Obviously, there's a lot of unknowns, but what are some of the ideas of getting people back to work while we balance the health and safety of every single Californian?
Well, I really think it's important to make sure that we get proper testing so we know who is infected and also who has already had it. So I personally, I'm not comfortable with opening everything up right now just because we don't really know who has it. And who's going to communicate the disease to their people. So, but I do think that with some of the ways that the small businesses, at least in our community, have been doing it, they've been, and I'm sure everybody else, lots of curbside pickup. We've been doing that with restaurants. We went to a kitchen store. We bought some things that we needed there, and they came out to the curb for us to pick up. Obviously wearing masks, all that kind of thing. So I really think that we're going to be when we get released, we're going to have to do this in stages and make sure that we have the proper masks and distance between all of us, but continue with the curbside pickup and just being cautious. I really think there's going to be round 2 and maybe round 3 of this as we go on until we get more herd immunity and some vaccinations.
All right. Thank you, Pamela.
Yeah.
Let me turn to Elizabeth. Your thoughts?
Yeah. I've been talking with some business owners, small businesses as well as larger businesses, all not essential though. And so while the essential businesses are really sacrificing right now, their employees in particular, sacrificing to be out there on the front lines, making sure we can get food and toilet paper and things like that. I think the non-essential businesses are going to have a huge challenge in coming back online. One concern in particular from a small business owner I interviewed the other day is she owns a salon, and it's a 6-chair salon. They do makeup and hair color and all kinds of different things. It's a very full service salon, and they have products. So she has one of those small business loans that really is structured for essential businesses, for them to be paying employees as they're working through the crisis. Well, obviously she's not paying her employees right now. They're on unemployment. Mm-hmm. And so she feels lucky to have this loan. But how is reimbursement going to be treated? Is it going to be one lump sum? Is she going to be treated differently because she's not an essential business? Those are a lot of concerns. And I think those are things that we certainly can think about from a legislative standpoint. On the state and on the federal level, to make sure that our non-essential small businesses, who are perhaps non-essential right now, but are absolutely essential to our quality of life here in our rural communities, to make sure that they are able to come back online in a way that is healthy, and that the resources that we have structured for them, the policies, can actually be used by them. That's something I think we need to think about now.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Your talk about opening the salons, this is a big issue that I have been very concerned about. As you can see, I'm getting a little long. So yes, you're absolutely right. All of our small businesses.
Nice, Trusty.
No comment. So let me turn to Audrey and maybe take this question to evolve it a little bit. Obviously, absolutely. Balancing between the health and safety of our communities and also the vitality of our local economy. I mean, at the federal level, certainly we've seen stimulus package 1 and 2, and there's likely to be more in the future. What can we do at the federal level to really support local businesses in this time of need?
Yeah, I'm going to try not to talk for half an hour about this, but the economic hardship we're facing, everyone on this call has a good grasp of, right? Like, I live in Chico. 90% of my friends in this town work in the food and beverage service industry or in the retail industry. Half of them still haven't seen a single unemployment yet, even though they've been out of work for 8 weeks. Like, the economic consequences are devastating for people and will continue to push more and more people into poverty, vastly increasing the economic inequality, right? That cannot be denied. But at the same time, I just had a tragic loss in my life, and I lost 2 friends. And I think every person of the 60,000 people that have died have people that love them. And so just saying, it's only been 60,000, we're fine, we're cool, open the doors up, that doesn't work for me, right? And what needs to happen is what's happening at our state level, which is our governor saying, here are the different stages, here's how we're going to do it. And then our local counties and our cities are collaborating to make that happen. They're collaborating to make sure they know the different tiers, which businesses fall into the different tiers, and which safety precautions need to be in place once we do reopen in those stages. And at the federal level, I mean, Rusty, you called them stimulus packages. Everybody's calling them that. They're crisis relief bills, right? These are immediate crisis relief bills. And long after we finish, I hope we get several more of these, but long after that, this fall, next spring, we're going to need to see actual stimulus bills who include more investment in our local economies. And we saw gross mismanagement and a lack of accountability already with corporations and massive organizations taking out these small business loans, and then the pot running dry before our folks got the chance to get them. So we need more accountability. We need more dollars in those pots. We need to trust the CDC. I'll be done now.
There's so much to say on such a challenging moment. Obviously this experience is not just gonna come and go away, right? It's gonna be with us even once we move past COVID-19. I think the experience is gonna be with us in some respects. Maybe I turn to Elizabeth. What do you think are some of the important lessons that we as community leaders collectively, and activists and grassroots leaders, but also our elected officials, should take from this moment into the future of governance in California?
I think probably when I say this, Pamela and Audrey will be, I imagine you'll be in full agreement. I think it's one of those things we've all been talking about. The things that we have been asking for decades, for help for underpaid workers, for relief and help for small businesses, broadband access, all of a sudden those are possible. You know, just in the last month, all of a sudden a bunch of that stuff that we've been asking for is possible. And so I think as leaders, especially in the policy field, knowing that when there is a right thing to do, we can find the money. Certainly the federal government it's easier for them than the state, but even on the state level, we know we can find the money because we've been able to do it thus far. And part of that is historic planning that's been really good, right? Rainy Day Fund that Brown started and that Newsom has been adding to. That's incredibly important. But if it's the right thing to do, we should always make every effort to find the money because it's there, obviously.
Yeah. Audrey, do you want to add to that? What are the lessons you're sort of taking from this experience?
Absolutely. I concur 100% with what Elizabeth said. But the thing that's really been on my mind lately is preparation. We're in a part of the world that unfortunately experiences crises a lot, right? Whether it's fires or even thinking back to the Oroville Dam disaster, we are a community that experiences crises. And so unfortunately, we've already learned a couple lessons in preparedness, but I think that we need to take a really systematic look because already, I mean, just in Butte County, we've already, I know across the district, we've had folks, NGOs stepping up. We've had different groups forming to make sure that the people that are the most vulnerable are getting taken care of. But we need to make sure we're ready and we're ahead of the game for the next one, right? Because these pandemics aren't going away. With the changing climate, things are gonna get more and more and more dangerous the farther along down we get. Wildfires are not going away and we need to be prepared. And so at a federal level, I mean, we've got the VOAD program, Volunteer Organizations Active in Disaster. I think all of our counties and communities need to have those ready to go. That's a group of NGOs and private citizens and businesses that come together, and that's the official community response to a disaster. And so when we have those sorts of organizations already ready and prepared, that we have a strategy of identifying the most vulnerable folks, right? Because right now you can have a group of people that say, hey, I want to help the most vulnerable, but we need to know who they are and how to help them, right? We need to be able to find our elderly citizens. We need to be able to make sure that we can get food to our people who lost their jobs or under the poverty line. And there is always going to be a federal and state response. After a fire, FEMA comes in, right? People lost their job, unemployment comes in, but there's always going to be gaps. And I believe that it's the community's job to fill those gaps. And the only way we can do that is if we're prepared. So that's the big thing that's been on my heart lately.
Great. Pamela?
Yeah, you know, I'm going to say I agree with what Elizabeth and Audrey have said. It's going to be I think that's going to be a common theme among us this evening for each of us. Another lesson I think that we learned, similar to what Elizabeth said, is, you know, when the chips are down, the money is there. You know, when the chips are down, people come together and they make each other masks and they go shopping for each other and they build a community, a network of community volunteers. So I think one of the lessons I've learned, I try to look at some of the silver lining a little bit in terms of there is humanity out there. Nature is bouncing back. You know, we have clearer air, we have clean water, we have dolphins in Venice, Italy. We have the Himalayas visible and from hundreds of miles away in India. You know, we have all these great things going. And I think that some of the things that we are doing now in this shutdown, such as telecommuting, telehealth, you know, people who are working from home, in the past, they've been told by their companies, oh, no, you can't do that. But suddenly, everybody's doing it. And, you know, similar with education. You know, I know that there's a social component to education with kids and even in college. That's some of the best memories I have when going to school. But also, I think that we can incorporate some of these lesser impact activities on our environment to maintain clean water, clean air, and promote a healthier environment. It also helps with reducing air pollution with asthma and allergies like that. So it also helps people when they do get sick. So those are some of the things and lessons that I see.
Great, thank you. So I'll pose this question to Audrey. Obviously, the center point we had of this crisis is that we've seen our healthcare system really stretched, especially in rural communities. So what are you, as our next member of Congress, focused on to ensure that we are keeping our rural hospitals open and funded and protected?
Rusty, the most important thing that we can do to make sure that our rural hospitals are open is to make sure that everyone has health insurance, right? Because when I don't have health insurance and I go into the emergency room, the hospital doesn't get being reimbursed for that, right? And so we made great strides with the ACA, getting more folks covered. We made great strides making sure insurance covered X, Y, and Z 10 things, but we have to continue to push that forward. There's still way too many uninsured folks in our country. I could talk forever about rural healthcare. I hope we get to that a little bit later. But I am running to replace a man who consistently votes to cut Medicare, so we have a list. I don't want to bore you by reading the list, but voting to not let HHS navigate and negotiate drug prices. And we're going to get him out of office because every single person needs healthcare, and that's how we get our rural hospitals funded. And we can talk more specifically, I hope, later about other tactics to get medical providers here, because the whole district is a medically underserved area, but the first thing we have to do is get people insured.
Yeah. Pamela?
And just in terms of how to bring back rural hospitals or how to support rural hospitals, is that kind of
how do we how do we ensure that our rural hospitals remain open, remain funded, remain protected?
Okay, so this is close to my heart because I do live with a physician, and I get a little bit of an inside scoop on what's happening in terms of their business as well as other people's businesses in the area. He's a radiologist, so he's a specialist, but in terms of their business is down by nearly 50% because the non-essential procedures and things that they would normally be doing are not being done. So I think, though, just in the global thing, I talked to him about this in particular, is how do we support our rural hospitals? We have to have infrastructure and economies in our rural districts to actually support rural hospitals. In other words, we need to have a patient base, and we need to be able to retain patients. So, you know, having an economic, having a better economy, anything that will promote better economics in our community is also going to be supporting the rural hospital. So that includes having broadband, that includes having affordable housing, that includes you know, more businesses that are resistant to downturns. So we have to have a patient base so the patients then can go to the hospital, and then the hospital in turn then can provide for the patients. But it's a symbiotic relationship. And also we need to work on making sure that, because most of the rural hospitals are mostly Medicare. I mean, there's a lot of Medicare patients. Let's say that San Francisco may have a younger population, less retirees, fewer retirees for the population. There is a difference in terms of reimbursement also from Medicare in the more rural areas. So we have to work on that too. And I don't know, maybe Audrey can do that for us when she's in Congress. But there's a lot to be said about this, yes.
No pressure, Audrey. We just need you to fix it. That's it. Just fix it.
I will restructure 1/6 of the economy by myself. Don't worry.
Awesome. Awesome. That's good. Elizabeth, maybe just building on a little bit of what Pamela talked about, which is, we've talked about rural hospitals, but obviously there's a shortage of providers in historically underserved areas, especially in rural parts of the state. What do you think we can do to really address that shortage, which is obviously connected to the whole healthcare system?
Absolutely. I think, you know, this is something I've talked about with a couple of you previously, which is just making sure that we as rural communities continue to be defined as rural communities so that we can continue to take advantage of the assets that policy makes available, that state and federal policy makes available. So forbearance or forgiveness of school loans for doctors and nurses who serve rural communities, making sure that there are resources for them that in big cities would be funded by, you know, hundreds of thousands or millions of people. In rural communities must be subsidized by the state. And that, I think, moves us into the concept of looking at hospitals as anchor institutions here in our rural communities. I think that can be more the case in urban spaces right now, but in rural communities, hospitals are even more important as cultural centers, as employers, as providing care for people from, you know, hundreds of miles away sometimes. And so making sure that when we can recruit doctors, we can use our institutions as an asset. They're not the only asset, you know, coming to us. We have a lot to give them as well, from a cultural standpoint, from a financial standpoint, and from the standpoint of options in being a resource. So I think kind of reframing how we look at healthcare provision here in our rural communities and what being an anchor institution means for hospitals and healthcare facilities throughout Assembly District 1.
That's great, and I would turn this question to Audrey. Obviously, it's really connected in a couple ways. One is the provider shortage that we have, but is really connected to Medicare. Pamela talked about, or you talked about how many constituents in the ones, CD1, SD1, 81 are connected to Medicare. So how do you both ensure that we're addressing a shortage of providers and at the federal level, obviously working to protect Medicare in a very real way?
Absolutely. I was hoping that you would bring this question back around to me. When I'm a freshman rep, I'm going to get sworn in January. Unfortunately, I won't be able to single-handedly fix the entire healthcare system, right? But there are things that I know that I can do in my first term. And one of those things is get more funding to the National Health Service Corps, which is what Elizabeth was mentioning around the loan repayments, right? By grouping together with other reps from rural areas, we can say, hey, this should be a funding priority and this needs to be in the budget. The funding for it has been slowly declining. Susanville, Cedar-Lassen County used to have 3 doctors that were part of the National Health Service Corps, and now they're down to 1. And that one person is the one doctor available, right? Brian, my campaign manager, we were at an event and he was talking to somebody and he's like, oh, I go to Chico all the time. That's where my pediatrician is. Because they have to drive from Susanville to Chico to see a pediatrician. And so a very real thing that we can do is boost the National Health Service Corps and make sure that we're reimbursing folks for coming here. That's a short-term fix. But the long-term fix is the people who want to live here are people who are from here, right? Everyone on this call lives in this part of the world because we love it. And so that means we need to invest in the education system of our young people. We need to make sure we have STEM education in elementary school. We need to make sure that we're identifying talent at an early age and fostering that and giving them access to the best education possible, and then giving them scholarships to go to get medical degrees and then to come back to Etna and Alturas and Shingletown to be doctors in their communities. And good thing that I'm going to get to be in Congress for like 30 years because it will take us a long time to do that. But those are just getting providers here is one of my most important issues. And then protecting Medicare, right? Rusty alluded to it, but we have a higher level of seniors in our district than the national average. And those folks are dependent on Medicare and Social Security. And we have to make sure that those both are rock solid benefits that folks can count on. And that starts with getting Congressman LaMalfa out of office. So.
I have to say one more thing too about that, about having people living here because they want to live here. Something that's been instigated or started, I think it was last year or so, there was a collaboration between UC Davis all the way up to Oregon, up in Portland. Can't remember the university up there, but anyways, it's got a big medical facility there, and it was to try to get some residency programs in more rural hospitals so that students that are, medical students that are finished with their medical degree, their classwork, then they can go to their residencies and internships and things at different and more rural hospitals and hope they fall in love with the area, and then they want to stay there and have a family and stay in practice. And Sierra Nevada Hospital here in Grass Valley just got approved to do a residency program, and I was told they got $170,000, I think, to start that residency program. So we need one of those programs, I believe, in every single rural hospital, because also while those students are here, they're obviously medical providers. They're obviously getting the residency, and they're also providing medicine. So I think it's a great win-win.
Right, absolutely. Well, I'm gonna throw this question to Elizabeth. Obviously, there is something powerful about having 3 great candidates in the North State who happen to be women, and because I think that it provides a great opportunity for the North State from the issues that are raised and how the issues that are so important to this community get approached. So maybe focusing on the healthcare issue, Elizabeth, can you give me some sense of what your read on some of the specific challenges for women in these communities really face in rural parts of the state?
Yeah, absolutely. There's 2 things that come to mind immediately, Rusty, actually 3. The first is rural communities in general, and actually 81, or District 1, I should say specifically, has a much higher than average rate of domestic violence. Then that's associated with all kinds of things, education level, family unity and stability. It's associated with job availability, income, that sort of thing. But that absolutely is a healthcare concern, both for women, sometimes men, of course, as well, but also children. So we absolutely need to take a look at it from that standpoint. But otherwise, people often think of women's healthcare as abortion access and support for women who are having children. That's something that's really, really hard to find throughout District 1. So the provision of hospitals and healthcare facilities absolutely must include the provision of women's healthcare. The other thing, though, women are most often childcare providers in their families. And so if they need to go to the doctor and they have to drive from Susanville to Chico, are they going to take their kids out of school? Do they have childcare available? Is it affordable? What about their job? Do they have sick leave for their job? You know, in California, it's mandated that employers provide sick leave, but it's on a pro rata basis and 3 days a year. 3 days of sick leave a year. Right now, when parents have their kids home with them and they're providing education and they may or may not be working right now, how is 3 days of sick leave enough? And what do they do with their kids? So there's a lot of things to think about when people have to drive a really long way for specific healthcare considerations.
Audrey?
Yeah, I'm gonna just let Elizabeth take most of that. She did a great job. A couple of just things to remember about our district, and I know I'm preaching to the choir because I'm seeing folks from Sierra County and Modoc County on this call, but there's not hospital facilities where women can deliver babies in those counties, you know, and if somebody's 9 months pregnant in Alturas, they're gonna likely go to Oregon, and if somebody's in Sierraville, they're gonna likely go to Reno. And I do not have children, but I can only imagine being 39 weeks pregnant and being in a car for that many hours to deliver a child. And so actually access is such a big deal. We have 2 Planned Parenthood clinics in the district and 3 women's health specialists clinics. And our district is the size of the state of South Carolina, right? There are 10 states smaller than our district. So physical access to resources is really, really challenging as well. And Elizabeth made some great points, and I'm not going to reiterate her, but.
Yeah. Now, Pamela, you know, I know there's still more to add, but a challenging position on such an important question when we've had 2 great responses already, but I'll turn it to you.
Hey, I agree with everything they're saying. And you know, I was reading an interesting statistic because women have to travel so far and oftentimes to have a child when they're pregnant. First of all, you know, the pre and the postnatal care isn't always great. They can't get there, or they prolong the first appointment that they have. But also, it's interesting that I read this statistic that talked about women who, you know, they know they're going to have a baby the next couple of weeks. They know that they're an hour or so from a delivery hospital place, and they're like, okay, I'm just going to go and stay with my relatives or something, or go rent a hotel or something to get there. But also, they schedule a lot of C-sections. So the C-section rate actually is a little bit higher because they want to make sure that, you know, when they get to the hospital, it's like, okay, we're just going to induce you, or we're going to have this baby because we don't want to have you drive another, you know, X number of hours in order to do that. So the term that I read was the term was, they said the decision to the incision. You know, that time frame is about 30 minutes. And so when women are traveling that far. So I think that it's definitely something that we need to do. We need more healthcare, not just for women, but for everybody, children, everybody in our district. Sure. Absolutely.
Sure. Let me maybe those are great answers to such an important issue in the district and really across the state and across the country. Let me actually turn it now to such an important issue that is directly connected to rural communities, especially at this particular moment, broadband. Obviously, you all know this issue better than most, better than many, but I guess I would maybe start with Audrey. What will it take to actually provide rural broadband access in California?
So we are at
in less than 90 seconds.
In less than 90 seconds. I'm going to talk really quick. So we are at an incredible moment, as Elizabeth mentioned earlier, that this is the time that it's possible. When we electrified the country, we decided that electricity is a utility and everyone should have it. And we haven't decided that about broadband yet. But I feel like we are on the cusp of saying access to future-ready internet service is essential for education, for public safety, for telemedicine, for economic opportunity, and everyone deserves it. The House on Thursday introduced an $80 billion bill, primarily focusing on rural broadband, and seeing the urgency of that at this time. Across CD1, we have 30% of folks have access, where the national average is between 67 and 73 for rural areas, right? So we are way behind rural America up here, and it absolutely needs to be a priority. And so besides pushing this bill through and making sure that there's the funding, we also have to hold our representatives accountable, to hold the companies accountable to actually do it, because it is not in their financial interest. And so we should probably elect someone who does not take corporate PAC money from folks like Verizon and Comcast. I'm just saying, like Doug LaMalfa does. I know that it's all friends on this line, and I just can't help telling you all the things that Doug does wrong. Sorry about that. Elizabeth, take it away.
Well, I will say, in fairness, we don't just have to tell our friends about what these candidates are doing wrong. We can tell everybody what these candidates are doing wrong. We need to fire them. So.
We need to fire the elected officials to be able to hire us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, so Audrey talked about what it's going to take to actually get it done, and we kind of got to the punchline of how do we do it. But I guess maybe taking a bit of a step back, sometimes you got to fully understand the need. Pamela, Elizabeth, what's your sense of the inequities that are really being created? Probably not just for those who happen to be joining us today, but obviously for those that aren't with us.
So sorry, Rusty, what's your question? I'm sorry.
Oh, no. Can you speak to what inequities are being created or being compounded as a result of not having rural broadband access?
Okay.
And I appreciate you challenging me to ask a better question. Yeah.
Thank you. This goes both ways. So the inequities that are already in place, I think Audrey or Pamela or both of you already mentioned this, are just simply being enhanced by the COVID-19 crisis. So inequities having to do with socioeconomic status, wealth, poverty, people with low wealth already don't have internet in their homes in most cases. In my opinion, and actually in international opinion, digital access and connectivity is a human right at this point. You cannot apply for a job. You can't now do schoolwork. You can't apply for college. You can't communicate with the outside world right now without internet access. And so the inequities that already exist, socioeconomic, cultural, Black and brown, tribal inequities, all of those things are enhanced by having to have internet right now, to even more than ever before, to communicate with the outside world, and not having it up here in rural California. Our preparedness for the future, our connectivity to the larger economy is absolutely hampered by not having that here.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Pamela?
1000%. There is no excuse not for everybody not to have internet connectivity where we are. There's many ways to connect to the internet, but I'm sure that some of you guys have heard about Elon Musk's Starlink. Have you heard about that? The Starlink? Again, it's kind of cool. It's sort of out there, but it's about 1,600 individual satellites that are low orbit satellites. So theoretically, the data transfers faster from Earth to the satellite. And their goal is to have it up and running enough and actually do a beta test in Northern California and Southern Oregon in November of this year, which would be a really interesting answer. And the prices, I don't think are going to, from what I can read, are not any more than what the rest of us are paying for some pretty cruddy stuff. But also, I think, like Audrey said, holding those telecom companies accountable, it's to their best interest, those large telecoms, to suppress and to not allow small entities, small businesses to come in. Like Nevada County, we had a chance to get some fiber optic. Big telecom did not like that. So I think that it's really super important for the longevity, sustainability, and the livelihood and the survivability of our rural district. It is a human right. Indeed.
Elizabeth, I think you had. Go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I just wanted to add, Pedro and my husband and I just saw Starlink go over us. Well, over Oregon, but we saw it a week ago. And I have to say that, combined with the free loan of Chromebooks and the sudden availability of Verizon hotspots, on buses around our district, I have a high level of worry and cynicism associated with private industry suddenly getting into the area of a human right where they have not performed well in the past. And yes, some of this stuff is very generous. They have not paid taxes for several decades, so they should be giving us free stuff, honestly. But I think that from a public policy perspective, we absolutely need to think harder about how we provide these things more equitably and more reliably and more transparently.
Yeah, a great closing comment on this issue, which is what has risen to the level of a human right is obviously something that we need to protect, make sure there's full access to, but obviously protect and preserve in a very real and serious way. Let me turn to just do a little bit of a time check. It's 5:50. I think we want to try to wrap this conversation up in the sort of around the 6 o'clock time frame. I've been monitoring the questions, and so I want to turn a little bit to the quickly to talk a little bit about the natural resource challenge in the North State part of California. Obviously, Audrey spoke to the challenges and the resiliency of North State when it comes to resource management. But I guess my question is, in what ways can natural resources in the region really be connected to creating jobs while at the same time really addressing some of the big problems in our environment? So we'll start with, we'll start with Pamela.
Oh, I'm so excited to answer this first.
We do only have, I know,
it's super,
30 minutes.
Okay, I'll make it just super quick. Biomass facilities, and then my opinion, biomass facilities. I have been reading and learning about them. I've been talking to a couple of people who are very integrally involved in establishing them and getting them through our district. But on the state level, SB 1122 was passed several years ago, and the idea was to put small 3 megawatt or less per hour biomass facilities throughout our entire our district a lot, but in terms of California, in areas that were targeted for high fire danger areas. They reduce biomass, which reduces, of course, the fuels, which reduces the fire danger, which hopefully will be reflected in our homeowners insurance if you can get it. It produces new jobs. It supports existing jobs. So that is my answer. I think that would be an outstanding thing to do. And I also found out that a biomass facility costs about $25 million-ish. So if we took some money from the greenhouse gas fund, emissions fund from California, and let's say $1 billion, we could have 40 biomass plants in our district, which is way cheaper than one car flyer.
Gotcha.
I'll leave it at that.
Great response, very succinct. Thank you so much. And you saved a little bit for our other two great
I hope
candidates.
so. I'm sorry.
Elizabeth, let me turn that to you, and then we'll go to Audrey.
Okay. So I noticed in the comments somebody brought up the Michael Moore film that came out on Earth Day recently, where they gave biomass a pretty bad rap. And I definitely, for those of you who have seen it, or for those of you who talk with folks from the Sierra Club or otherwise who say it's not what we in rural California have known it to be, which is clean power. The way that they portrayed it was inaccurate for our region. In our region, with forests that have not been well managed since European settlement, 100 years ago, we are so massively overgrown that we could provide a healthy source of consistent biomass provision to those small plants that Pamela talked about for 50 years, 100 years or more. Just in actively, sustainably managing our forests. And again, this is something that we have to be part of, our communities and our collective institutions. It's not something that can solely be guided by private corporations, because it is for the public good. And so because it's a public good, it's not just for us. We are the ones that burn up, of course, but the benefit to cleaner forests, cleaner air, cleaner water, more water is to everyone in the state of California. And so I believe we have at least one person from San Francisco on the line, and Rusty, I know you're down in Southern California. Both of those huge population centers benefit extraordinarily from our clean water, from our clean air, from our carbon sequestration. So ensuring that what we do is supported by the entire state of California is really important.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. Let me turn it to Audrey to wrap up this question.
And so just to be clear, Elizabeth and I would really like to teach a college course for multiple semesters on this topic. So we're trying to get it down into like 3 minutes. And so instead of going on a diatribe about carbon sequestration, which Jake requested in the chat, I'm just going to talk about the practical policy implications and how we can actually get this moving forward. Because I think at this point, everyone's on board with the fact that we have to increase the pace and the scale of the forest restoration work to keep our communities safe, to keep air quality to a point where we're not having human health impacts, to mitigate climate change, to provide local jobs. We mentioned that the biomass plant in Loyalton is going bankrupt. We used to have 22 lumber mills in Siskiyou County. We're down to 2. And we all understand what that does to the local economic impact, because we've all felt it over the last decades. But here's what we're gonna do. The other thing, besides getting more funding to the National Health Service Corps, that I'm gonna do when you send me to Washington, D.C., is I'm gonna make sure that we implement conservation stewardship agreements, which are already in law. They're in the Farm Bill, and these are the mechanisms that bring different stakeholders together, like Elizabeth's talking about, to create an integrated natural resource management plan for a certain area. So at the table, you have private foresters, you have all levels of government, you have local nonprofits, you have the Sierra Club, environmental organizations, you have the Native American tribes, who, by the way, know a lot more about we do than managing forests healthily. Healthily? That's not a word, you know what I mean. And so you have all the stakeholders together and they make a plan. And then the private industry folks get to go into the forest, they get to implement that plan, and they're paid back by the biomass that is pulled off of those forests. And so this is already in law, but we need to make sure that our District 5 supervisor for the Forest Service, Randy Moore, has everything that he needs to push those forward. We need to make sure that we're working with the state level and the local county levels to make sure that we make this happen. 41% of my district is in federal forests. And when you elect me, I will consider myself the natural resource manager and chief of those 41%. And I'm gonna work really, really hard to make sure that we get these forests healthy, because it's the #1 most important thing that we have to do in this district. So.
All right, thank you. So I want to talk, just to sort of close out our conversation here. We've talked about, the moment that we're in, the impact to our healthcare system, the challenge of broadband access and inequities connected there, and obviously how our natural resources can be a real job creator and a real opportunity for both the environment and our economy. Let's turn to the political side, because all this is a great conversation, but it's only a conversation if we can't get you all elected. And so, you know, in connection with I think there was a question that was raised. Do you believe that this, I'm going to ask two questions. Do you believe that this moment advantages and favors incumbents, or do you think it favors challengers? And lastly, what do you need us to do collectively in order to try to do what we need to do in November? So why don't we start with Audrey, and then we'll get to Elizabeth.
Awesome. Thanks for this, Rusty. I got into the race in 2018 because I knew that it was winnable in 2020. I had no idea that all of the craziness that's happening in the world right now would happen, but I knew that the turnout in this district in 2020 was enough for a Democrat like me to win this seat. We have outraised Congressman LaMalfa. We've raised over $1 million. He's raised $791,000. Over 50% of his donations are from corporate PACs and transfers from the GOP party. We have a moment in time where it is uniquely possible in this district where our registration disadvantage is shocking, right? I absolutely, with every fiber of my being, believe that we can win this year. And we have the data that backs that up, right? In terms of what I need you folks to do, you're already doing it. I'm looking at folks who are monthly donors, who are still, amidst all of this craziness, are still sacrificing to make sure that we have the funds that we need to win this thing. You're already on the phones, you're making community wellness check calls. When we get a lot farther down into the summer, we're obviously going to transition back to more campaign-related phone banking and texting, and hopefully, God willing, door knocking if we can get outside. But you folks have showed up for me over the past 31 months, and we're going to bring it home in these last 7, and we're going to make this happen. So,
all right, great. Pamela.
So your question was, are these times, is this moment better for an incumbent or is it better for a challenger? And as a challenger, I have to say it's way better to be a challenger. Especially if your incumbent has really bad voting record. And suddenly it takes a worldwide global pandemic with people dying for them to start voting for the people of their district. That's crazy. So absolutely, it is a great time to challenge a person who has been pretty useless for all of us and our environment. So I am looking really forward to challenging him more on the issues and the policies. And unfortunately, we're all stuck at home on our Facebook and on our social stuff. But I'm planning to do a lot more videos about those things as well. And in terms of my campaign, you know, many of you I see on here that have donated to me, and I want to say very, very much, I appreciate that so much. You have no idea. May 9th, 1 more week. Huh, Rusty? Then I will be an endorsed California Democratic Party Canada. And I think then the heavens will open, money will come in, volunteers will be knocking on my door. Yeah, but I'm really hoping that that everything kind of keeps on going smoothly, and we get some more inertia and excitement. And I just want to say also real fast, if this is my last chance to say something, I want to say, Rusty, I think you're doing an outstanding job. Number one, I'm very proud to be a California Democrat. I don't think I could be a Democrat in any other state, to be perfectly honest with you. I think the governor is doing an amazing job. And I am for the little people of our district. I want to help the people. I want to help our environment. I want us to be sustainable long term. And I believe that the policies that I stand for, and I believe Elizabeth and Audrey stand for, are what we are needing and what will get us there long term. So let's do it.
All right.
Thank you.
Very good.
Yeah, thank you.
Elizabeth, and then I'll turn it back to Audrey for, I felt like Pamela got in both answering a question and a last word. So I'll turn it to Elizabeth for the same, and I'll turn it back to Audrey to make some closing comments as well. So Elizabeth.
All right. Yeah, I actually was just talking with my consultant / dear political friend about what this looks like, what the pandemic does to a campaign. And he felt, as does everyone I've talked with, that this is an amazing moment for challengers. The incumbents absolutely weren't ready for this, right? And to Audrey's point earlier, being prepared is something that leaders should be. And I think all three of us are ready to be prepared in this moment and in the future for coming disasters, climate change, population impacts, fires, dam failures. There's all kinds of things that could happen. And I think, you're talking with three candidates who are holistic thinkers and who are ready to not only bring new ideas of our own, but to solicit your new ideas as well. And so I think that makes us incredibly strong candidates. The other part of that, though, and this kind of goes from it kind of bridges the challenger and campaign elements of that question, Rusty, is I feel so grateful and lucky to be running with two other really exceptional candidates. Who have policy positions that I admire, who have ethics that I admire. I just don't even hesitate to endorse my fellow candidates here in District 1. And the work that Audrey and her volunteers did in 2018 helped me in 2019 in the special election. And the work that I and all of you did in 2019 is going to help all of us this year in 2020. I mean, this is the year for change. 2020 is it. So I think, as COVID-19 kind of puts new pressure on the campaign in different ways, we are trying to pivot. We're trying to remain relevant, to put out content that you can relate to and that you can share with your friends. And so to Russ, to your question about what people need to do, Audrey said it, you're doing it, writing postcards, making phone calls. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. We're going to make a difference here in this region. But the other thing, I talked with a gentleman earlier this week, I guess, and he is an avid sportsman. He does a lot of hunting, is a member of at least 2 gun clubs in the area. And he and I have had a lot of back and forth via email and now via phone about gun rights. And he said that he so deeply admires my approach to gun rights and my understanding of the history of that issue here in California, that he has shared my candidacy with his gun club members, several of which wear big red hats. So some of what we can do, what you can do in the circles in which you travel, is share our message, that of all three of us. And I think the strength of any one of us as candidates can really help the rest of us. So if you can have those conversations when you're able, of course, to reach out to folks, that's one of the most powerful ways to change people's mind. You are a trusted source of information for many people in your life. So thank you for being that. And thank you for being on here today. It's great to see you all.
All right. Thanks, Elizabeth. And I'll turn it back to Audrey for the last word here. Audrey?
Awesome. Thanks, Rusty. I don't want to underscore what a challenging time we're living in, right? We're stressed, we're anxious. When we go to the grocery store, we get nervous, and I want to honor that anxiety. And I also want to challenge you, because we look right now at our healthcare workers and our grocery store workers and our essential workers as these amazing public servants, right? And we're so grateful for them. But I want to challenge every single person on this call to think about what public service means for them right now in this crazy, unique moment in our history, right? Because at the end of the day, it's not about us, right? Every single one of you can do something to make your neighbor's life a little better, right? And every single one of you can do something to make your community's life a little better. And I think at the end of the day, Pamela and Elizabeth and I are all taking on this challenge to run for office because we love our country, we love our communities, and we love our neighbors, right? And so let's figure out how in this crazy time in American history to to serve them. And whether that's dropping off groceries, whether that's calling a shut-in, whether that's hopping on our community check-in calls, whatever you can do while staying safe, do it, right? Because it is what's needed in our country right now. It's what's needed in our communities right now, and it feels good, right? And so that's what I want you to be thinking about as you hop off this call, and just know you are so appreciated, and we are all so grateful for you.
All right. Thank you, and certainly thank all of our great candidates, Elizabeth, Pamela, Audrey. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to have this conversation with all of you while others watched and commented. It's been certainly been a pleasure. I do want to take a moment to acknowledge just another great candidate, democratically endorsed candidate, Jackie Smith, in Assembly District 6. We certainly thank you for being here and all of your great, outstanding work. So with that, we are. This concludes our agenda. Again, I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us this evening. More than 100+ of you joined this conversation. You all know, and I think has been already put in the chat, you know where to go in order to get engaged in these important campaigns. I will encourage you to do so, to get active, give till it hurts, make phone calls until you're so tired you don't want to talk to anybody else. And when that's the case, then you can work to send some text messages, and do that in the peace and silence of your own home. But again, the work that you all are doing in the northern part of our state is so incredibly important. And so I want to thank you all for being here. Thank our candidates. We're going to give them a closing big round of applause as we go. Thanks everybody. And we will see you soon. All right. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.